Sweet. All right. Hey, welcome everyone out there in live stream land, live land here. Got hundreds of people in here today. So we really packed it out. All having 1.5 metres between us and, being COVID safe and all that sort of stuff. Welcome to Tea with Mo. I don't know, what are we up to? 7, 8? Who cares? It's just about being here, turning up. I get another day on the planet to share some stuff that I've found and share it with some beautiful souls as well too. Once again, Tea with Mo is about lectures on non-duality, so every time that we come together I just do a bit of a synopsis around what non-duality is. I think I'm getting a little bit better at this and probably even coming to a greater understanding of how to explain it as well too. And then we'll go into what we're going to talk about tonight. Or actually, I probably should say this is what we're going to talk about tonight, but this is what non-duality is. That's probably a better way of doing it. Tonight we're going to talk about how to access your future self. Okay. Yeah, so we access the future self, which is one of many. How to do that, and then I guess in a sense the questions to ask yourself, and what would you like to know? So if you could access your future self, what would be the questions that you would want to ask it? So that's probably a really good place to start, yeah? Because what that actually does is it starts to set up the reality that future self exists in. Okay? So let's just put that one out there for the moment, and then let's bring it back to a brief synopsis, like Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, Non-duality is not only a philosophy, not only a way of thought, not only a way of living, but an actuality, an experience, which I've just had more so recently. I've been able to touch the infinite. The finite met the infinite. And that moment was defining for me, because everything that I have been speaking about, everything that I've felt, everything that I've believed to be true, I got to experience it. I got to feel it. It was a reality for me. It wasn't just a thought or a concept. And I sit here with great conviction in that, and I can speak to that because I can speak from it. And that's the key. So non-duality is the understanding that we all come from one, and that we are all of one, and that we're one, that we are many of the one. So, and the way I explained it last week is that we've got this beautiful universe that we're a part of, but as we are individual units of consciousness that are a part of this planet, this planet is part of a solar system, the solar system is part of a galaxy, that galaxy is part of the universe. So we are a part of the universe, but we are the universe appearing as this human being. Hello. Hi, Mary. Welcome. So just as this tree, and if we look at the tree, each of these individual units of the leaves make up the tree. One is neither less nor greater than the other, but one is an integral part of the whole. And so when we look at the umbrella tree, we don't break it down to a reductionist perspective of going, oh, that's a group of leaves with particular stems and branches and roots. We go, that's the tree. So as we look at the tree as a whole is each one of these individual fractals, in a sense, having its own experience, and then we experience the tree as a whole. This is, in a sense, a microcosm of the macrocosm of what life and non-duality is, oneness is, that we all come from this one thing. And this one thing that we all come from is I guess, the ocean of love and mercy. It represents love. And if you tuned in last week, we spoke about all life is a replication of one fractal, and that one fractal is the fractal of free will. So if that's tweaking something within you, then check out the video that we put up last week, and it's on YouTube as well too. So what non-duality basically comes to an understanding is unity consciousness. And unity consciousness is that we are all one. That if I judge another, ultimately I'm judging that part of myself. Carl Jung said you cannot see anything outside of yourself. So what you see in another, your perspective of another, is a reflection of either what exists within the light of you or what exists within the shadow side of you. So when I judge another for something, it's in a sense I've judged that part of myself, that I've pushed it into the shadows. And I find it easier to project that judgment upon another and separate myself from another. Whereas unity consciousness starts to allow you to become aware that whatever is arising within me through the interactions that I have with another is my experience. It's either a distortion of love or it's an alignment of love. And if it's an alignment of love, you will be able to feel that. And it's also, if it's a distortion of love, you will also be able to feel that. The beautiful thing around this is that I can love both the distortion and the alignment because it's all love. Yeah? So when we look at non-dualistic thinking, this brings us to this topic tonight, which is how do I access my future self to ask it the questions that I would like to know now. Right. Now this is a bit of a wild concept if we live in the world of dualism, because what we then talk about is this concept of future. And future is something that hasn't happened in the world of dualism. Future is then based upon time. Time we look at as past, present and future. The past has already happened. There's a sense of known. There's a field of data that we've been able to extract from it. And then we find this concept of this thing called the present moment. And then we've got this concept of the future moment, another moment that is about to arrive that hasn't arrived yet. And we call it the future. The interesting thing is that with the past, we look at the past and there's a sense of known because it has happened. We've had an experience, we've given it an association, we've integrated, we've assimilated it, we've categorized it and we've stored it. And then we have this present moment, which we call the present, but in the present moment in relation to time, this moment comes and goes in the blink of an eye. Well, there it is, now it's gone, there it is, now it's gone. And I'm never really, in a sense, in the present moment because I'm trying to catch the interface between what I call the past and the future. And this present moment seems to be very momentary, but it comes and goes, and I can never actually touch it. So this is when I live in a dualistic world, when I start to see that time is based upon a linear construct. That there's this direction and then there's this direction, and somewhere in the middle I sit, wherever that is on the timeline. But it's usually in the moment, it's usually in the now, because you can really never get out of the now. When we start to see time from a non-dual perspective, what that does is it opens up. Because we start to expand time from a linear perspective and we start to bring time into a simultaneous perspective. That both past, present and future are actually all happening at the same time, in the same moment. Because if we're going to live in dualistic thinking, where there's one, there's also another. When we start to live in a non-dualistic thinking, then both coexist. Now, for some of you, this might be melting your mind at the moment, because it's really hard for the mind to see beyond itself. And the interesting thing is the mind can only look backwards, because the mind is a computer program. It needs data. Give me data, then I can categorize it, I can assimilate it, I can predict what the future could be. But it doesn't know. See how the mind cannot know the future, it can only know the past. So the mind doesn't necessarily like this type of philosophy because it says, holy crap, this isn't in my programming. So it will resist this type of thought process. So what I ask is to be curious. And a beautiful man taught me about curiosity not only weeks ago, and it opens up the unknown. So what we're saying to the mind, hey mind, come here, I'm going to hold your hand, we're going to be curious. The mind is shitting itself, going, holy crap, really? We go, it's okay, let's just be curious and let's look into the abyss of the unknown and see what we can discover. Now we're on an adventure mind. Come on, let's go. So it's about bringing it along. So when we think of dualism, time is linear. Now we seem to live in this very linear field of time. Now that works quite well for us. And I'm not saying, hey, let's get rid of it, but I'm just saying be aware of the linear construct of time, because what that does is it allows me to say Tea with Mo is going to start at 5:30 and it's going to finish at 6:15, and then we've got something else. So we can use that linear construct of time to plan things in a sense. So I'm creating a concept or a potential future at 6:30. I'm creating a potential future at 8:30. Now, notice, because it hasn't happened, it can only ever be a construct of the mind. It's an illusion. Thank you, my beautiful friend. It's an illusion until it becomes a reality. Yes. So in this moment, there is many potential realities that could happen in my future. Yeah. So in this moment called the now, which is really, when you think about it, the only moment that you have ever had. Wherever you have ever been, it's always been here, and it's always been now. Even if you're going to be over there later, at that point in time, you'll be here, and it'll be now. Yeah? So you never ever leave the moment. And it's interesting because, you know, when we talk about meditation, or even we talk about, hey, what's happening through your days, you just need to be present. You go, oh, you know, I'm just not in the moment. I'm either in the future or in the present. You go, no, you're not in either one of those, because you can't be. What you're doing is you're inviting the future into your now, and you're inviting the past into your now. That's all you can ever do. You have never ever left the moment. So in this moment, I would like you to think back to your last birthday. Your last birthday. Let me think back to my last birthday. It's pretty hard for me to remember this, but I'm having some type of thought. Actually, let's let go of that, because that's way too far back for me to remember. Let's think about this morning when we woke up. That's not too far away. So can you bring a memory of this morning when you woke up, how you felt? Upon waking, how did you feel? Because I definitely remember how I felt upon waking. I was frantic, which is not like me. But I remembered it. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. I'm frantic. I'm really anxious. And I had to reorient myself. So as we have brought that memory in, we have brought in the past. Where did we bring it into? We brought it into the now. Yeah. So what I'd like you to do now also is I want you to think about what you're going to have for dinner, which obviously isn't now, unless you're eating dinner now, but hopefully it might be in a couple of hours. So I'm just going to bring into mind what I'm potentially going to have for dinner. So now I'm bringing the future into my now. Yeah. So there was some research that was done, and what they found was that throughout our days we spend 28% of our time in the past, 42% of our time in the future, and only 12% in the now. And I think there's another 12% that they couldn't account for, because what they were doing, they hooked people up to fMRI scanners, and they noticed there was particular parts of the brain that fired up and lighted up in particular times. And these parts of the brains were the prefrontal cortex, the process where you have imagination and visualization. And with imagination and visualization, you can time travel. Very powerful place. And what they found was there was a particular part when we travel forward in time, it lights up, and a particular part when we travel back in time, it lights up as well. So they were able to read and notice how much intensity, how much time we actually spent in those particular parts of our brain. Yeah. So it makes sense from a safety and survival perspective that I spend at least 42% of my time thinking about the future. Because I'm trying to plan how to keep safe. I'm trying to plan how to get through the day, and I'm trying to plan my future. Now, if you think about this, everything in your life has always been about your future. Because that's the direction you're going in. Yeah? Even though you might drag up the past, why are you dragging it up? So you can keep safe in the future. Because I don't really need to revisit the past because I'm already here. But I can use the information from the past to flip into the future so I can try to work out where I'm going. Yeah? So it's quite interesting then that we don't spend too much time contemplating future self. We get caught up in past self. It's interesting too when we talk around the spiritual realms, we go, oh, I'd really like to know what my past lives were. What was I doing? Where was I? That's why I'm doing this. This is why I feel this way. That's wonderful. But what about your future lives? Because if we come from a non-dualistic perspective, time is both linear and simultaneous. So the future is always happening now and the past is happening now. Now, I don't know how well versed you are, and I've got some really beautiful people here in the audience who've done quantum, and we've got quantum coaches, we've got some very esteemed health professionals as well, and other people that have been interested in this. But some people in this room would have experienced timeline therapy and have a concept of what timeline therapy is, and even further, quantum timeline therapy. So I have experienced that. We've had a couple of other people, and we've actually got a coach here that actually does it as well too. So within quantum timeline therapy, what you can do is you can move backwards in time to a younger version of yourself which had some experiences, and you as this version of you can sit with the younger version of you and in a sense be the support, be the older, wiser part of you to sit with that and explain the context of that situation. So there was a young part of me, an 8-year-old part of me, that was being bullied and called a chink, and a lot of racial slurs were coming towards me. But at that time, the 8-year-old part of me didn't understand why this was happening. So naturally, the 8-year-old part of me thought it was my fault because this was happening to me. Ultimately, there's something wrong with me. There was something wrong with me. I was flawed. Yeah. And so that then creates negative cognitions, and we look at it from an EMDR perspective. That could be a touchstone memory. It creates feeder memories, and then we start to use that as a script. It becomes part of the subconscious mind, and that's the way that we read our world. Yeah. So through timeline therapy, I was able to go back to that space. Thank you. I was able to go back to that space, and me as the older, wiser part of me sat with the younger part of me who was experiencing that, in a sense, trauma or adverse life experience, and I was able to give context to it. Imagine if you were your older brother or your older sister and you're coming in and go, hey, little one, it's okay. So it was a really beautiful experience, because then what I started to notice, and even from an EMDR perspective, as we start to collapse the wave of negative cognitions and we place positive cognitions in it, timeline therapy, EMDR, very, very similar in nature, I then started to know that my memory starting to change. I then started to notice the way that I was looking at life started to change. And the reason why the way I was looking at life was starting to change, because I was looking at myself differently. Yeah. And I thought, this is wonderful. I've got to tell everyone about this. Everyone get on to quantum timeline healing, quantum therapy. I thought, that's great. And then I started to realise, I went, hang on. in that moment, in the quantum field, the younger version of me was visited by the future version of me. And I thought, okay. So if that can happen where I'm the older, wiser version of me visiting the younger, less wise version of me, and it comes back and it holds space and it offers some context, and this is happening in the moment, so I've brought that past into this moment and I'm experiencing it in this moment, and it holds and encapsulates that, then why couldn't I, as the me now, this version of me, access the future part of me? And could I invite the future part of me into this space? And could I ask it questions? Could I ask it for context? And maybe I'd get some answers. So I tried it. And what do you know? The future part of me came and sat with me. Now, the interesting thing is, at the beginning of this, I said, imagine if you could access the future part of you, your future self. What would you ask it? Okay. So the interesting thing is, the question that you ask will then, in a sense, impact and dictate the particular future self that you're going to access. All right? Because where you are at this moment, in this now, there's a field of possibility. It's an infinite field of possibility. So there's lots of these, and this comes back to a quantum theory of many worlds theory, that in each and every moment there is an infinite number of parallel universes that you can access. Because remember, we live in an infinite universe. Just because we live on Earth, it doesn't mean that we don't access the universe. It's sort of like, we get caught up in this, we're on this Earth and this is how things work. But the universe, it's separate to us and it's infinite, but we're not a part of it. We're on this rock. Was it the third rock from the sun? We sit here looking out into infinity, but apparently we're not part of infinity, we're finite. No. You are an expression of the universe. You are the universe expressing itself through each and every one of you. This leaf is the universe expressing itself through this form, and now this form, and the water here, and the tea in the cup. Everything is consciousness. Everything is the universe expressing itself in a particular form. So, we've got this infinite number of possibilities that lies ahead of us. Depending on the question that you ask, it will then pick out the reality that you're asking it to. Right? So this is where your intention is really important, because what your intention drives your attention. The question you ask, the future self that you want to meet with that question will exist in a particular universe, a particular parallel universe, a particular world. If I want to ask myself about what am I going to do at this center, then that future self will be located in a world where the center exists. If I want to ask my future self about where is it that I'm going to buy a block of land, large acreage, to create a retreat, it will be a future self that exists within a world where there's a retreat. So depending on the question, you can access these future parts of self. Yeah? Now, if I want to ask the question, what's happening with this space here, it will go to, and this is called reality transurfing. Okay? I'm surfing, in a sense, the web of realities that the future part of me has already got this place, and what did we do with it? And both Ali and I actually accessed this. We went, okay, what have we done here? It wasn't, what are we going to do here? Because when we say, what are we going to do here, I'm driven by ego. This is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to create, all that sort of stuff, yeah? So I think that I'm the one in control of this. But life is living you. Right? So if you really want life to live you, then tap into a future part of yourself and go, what did I do? But I'm tapping into a part of myself. And both Ali and I checked this and we went, hey, we want to speak to the future part of ourselves that created a container that expanded the consciousness of the planet. And so we were able to then access that particular part of future self. And in asking that question and in accessing that part of future self, that part of future self then spoke to us. It didn't appear, go, poof, here I am, here, I'm just going to tell you this. What happened was that you access it within you. Because remember, time is both linear and simultaneous. And this is where you need to be clear with your intuitiveness, tapping into the I am part of you. Because that's where your future self exists. You can do this through meditation, you can do this through visualization, you can do it through breath work. But ultimately, all of this is done through intention. Intention. You know, the most powerful act that has ever been created is intention. Intention comes from awareness. The one infinite intelligence became aware of itself. It then created an intention. The intention was, I want to know thyself. And from that, everything expanded. Which is really interesting, isn't it? Because we, as consciousness, want to know thyself. You are the creator getting to know itself. You are on the leading edge of creation. You are not about creating God realization, because you are God realizing itself. God realizes itself through you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and this, and that, and this. All of this is the one infinite intelligence getting to know itself. So in accessing your future selves, you are able to then tap into that and then ask it what you did to get to where you want. So what's your intention? What do I want to create? And what you then do is you reverse engineer it. And the way that you reverse engineer it is you go, show me what I did. Show me where I need to go. And you don't have to create anything. You surrender and you allow life to live you. You allow the mycelium of life to speak through you, and it will guide you. It'll say, get up and go over there. And as you get up and go over there, the other person will be told, get up and go over there. And all of a sudden, there's two people getting up and going over there, and then they're running into each other and going, hey, shit, I didn't know you were going to be here today. Obviously, we need to have a bit of a chat. Hey, Damien. Pretty much how it goes. And that, that's life, eh? That's the beautiful thing about life. So if you ever get caught up in, I don't know what to do, I'm lost, I'm in this transitional period, just go, okay, let's access all of me. Don't get locked in that you're a finite thing. Access the infinite part of you. Access the non-dual part of you. Access the oneness, that you are everything. The key here is intention. We can have this intention and we can tap in and we can have these conversations. But the other part of it is, are you worthy of receiving? And that's the kicker. Because if you do not believe that you are worthy of receiving, you will be the greatest resistance to that. Okay? We can ask and ask and ask and ask, and life is going, cool, free will, I can do that, I can replicate that, but then you need to be able to receive it. Because if you don't receive it, you'll push and you'll resist. And you might push and resist what you think others, but ultimately you're pushing and resisting yourself. So, in this moment, what I'd ask you to consider, what would be a question that you would like to ask your future self? I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to consider that. And if anyone would like to let me know, I wonder what that would be. So as you contemplate that question, you might actually get an answer straight away. You just need to listen. Yeah? And notice where that voice comes from, where that message comes from. Where does it bubble up from? Where does it download from? Where does it expand from? Where does it shoot into? So would anyone like to share what their question would be? Yes. Alex.
Are you content?
Are you content? Wow. So you would ask your future self
If I'm content.
if you're content. Okay. And if it said, so what in actual fact, so this is interesting, so then Alex would go, so would you like to visit a future self that is content?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so see, being specific, I'm going to go to a reality where my future self is content. Yeah? And then, could you then ask it how? Or I don't even have to, because now I've tapped into that. Yeah? I've got this communication with the future part of myself that is content. I've opened up that field. And can I then continue to move along that pathway? Yeah. Can I ask you, are you content at this moment?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And you always look content each time I see you. You've got so much support and love around you, and
Of course, yes.
you continue to amaze me. You absolutely amaze me.
Thank you, Maurice.
Yeah. Anybody else? What questions would you ask? Sharon.
I asked, how did I get well?
How did I get well? Wow.
And the answer came immediately.
Yes.
And it was, you already know the answer to that, and that's a waste of a question. And so I thought, oh, that's just me answering that. So I
That's the ego.
dissented and
Yeah.
asked again, and I got the same answer with the addition of ask better questions.
Ask better questions. Wow. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's this wiser part of you that's going, hey, come on. Yeah.
Not a waste of a question.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's in a sense, so if you were going to ask that question again, how would you ask it?
I wouldn't ask that question because I do know those answers.
Yes.
I would come up with something that isn't a thought that occupies my mind now. Something that leads me to where I I end up, my greater self, not my day-to-day self. So that question is a day-to-day self question.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I already know the answers to.
So
I
the
would have to ponder a much better
sure. So the question was a day-to-day self question, and what you would ask again is something that leads you to, in a sense, your higher self, or a greater expansion of beyond the day-to-day stuff. Yeah, which encompasses more. Is that in a sense? Yeah.
And that would be something like, what gifts would I potentially have to offer about my journey to wellness?
What would I potentially have to offer others upon my journey to wellness? Yes. Maybe, yes. Okay, cool. So even in that conversation there, you were given information to consider something else and refine it. Yeah, okay. So you can do that, once again, with any question. Yeah, cool. Josh?
I just ask my children are happy.
Are my children happy? Okay, right.
Immediate yes.
Yes, okay. And so then you could potentially move to that. You could then ask, and so are you happy with that answer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the sense within you that comes from that answer?
That I'm a good dad.
Yeah.
And I'll raise them to be happy.
Yeah. And so potentially I could just continue to follow what I am doing at the moment. Yeah.
And that's what my answer was.
Yes.
Continue what you're doing now.
Continue what you're doing now. Yeah. Same as well. Yeah. So we've got 3 people in around the continue. Yeah. Interesting. Did you have a question?
Mine was, where will I be living?
Yes.
And I did have an answer. So, yeah, I was talking to Daniel today, and I kind of already knew how to visualize, but yeah, when I answer that question, I know I do have an exact visualization, what that looks like, what it feels like,
Feels
what it
like.
sounds like, what
Yep.
it smells like.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could then ask, could you give me some confirmation and lead me in the direction to that? Yeah, and so then what happens is you then become more wired to see, in a sense, signs. Okay. Yeah. So, anybody else have a question? No? Okay. So, in a sense, as much as so you can access the future self within this lifetime, yeah, but you can also access future self within the densities of consciousness. So you can access your higher self. Some people call it the oversoul. It's the form of consciousness that oversees all of your incarnations. Because you've had this is more than your first life. You've had many, many lives, maybe hundreds, thousands, even probably millions of lives. Okay? And some of us are on the return journey, some of us are on the outward journey, and some of us are on the return journey. So, when you sort of meet people and go, oh, that's an old soul, they might be on the return journey. Okay? And they might even be, and if we start to look at the Law of One teachings, they might be a wanderer. So a wanderer is a soul, a form of a beautiful unit of consciousness that has chosen to come into a lower density of experience for a specific reason. And usually it's to increase the consciousness, the unity consciousness awareness, especially within this density of existence. This density of existence is polarizing. That's why it's dualistic. This density of existence offers us a great catalyst for spiritual awakening and spiritual growth. Okay? So as we come into this space, this experience, we get to choose. We're either choosing service to self or service to others. Okay, and that's from the law of one materials anyway, which I think is just a beautiful way of understanding stuff. And we'll put a link at the bottom of this to explain what that is too. So you can access many parts of self, future experiences, future timelines, and future densities as well, depending on what the question is. Yeah, and how far a reach you have with your, let's even call it belief, because a belief is a possibility filter. Okay? If you have the belief that you can access your future self, then now it is possible. If you don't believe it, then of course you're not going to be able to access it, because you've shut down the possibility. If I have the belief in extraterrestrials, then there's more chance that I am going to see evidence of it. Whereas if I don't believe it, even if there is evidence of it, I'm going to shut it down, because it's not within my scope. Okay? So think about your belief system. Your beliefs are possibility filters. They open up the possibility field. From quantum physics and quantum mechanics, there's an infinite number of possibilities in each and every second. Right? Even one of our seconds is very large in relation to quantum seconds. A Planck second, there's 334,000 Planck seconds in one of our seconds. That's the smallest amount of time that we can measure from a quantum perspective. In each one of those 334 thousandths of a second, you are making and remaking your body. You are shifting from one reality to another through what they call plasma. Okay? So each time, so in this 1 second, you've shifted 334,000 times. What dictates where you shift in the field, the quantum field, the field of possibility, is your frequency. What is your frequency? This is why frequency is really important. So as I end this conversation, I think next week we'll start with, let's have a chat about quantum and what that is, and how we jump into many worlds, many times per second, and how we can access many worlds, and how we can shift that, and how we can heal our bodies, because we're making and remaking ourselves. So that'll be an interesting conversation. Cool. Thank you very much for joining me in there and out here as well.